How many times do you think you need to see God at work in your life before you really begin to trust him? I'd like to think it would be once, right? When God shows up and he does amazing things in your life. When you sit in awe, your mouth drops open, and you know for a fact that the God of the universe has stepped into the space that you occupy. And he's worked either on your behalf or for someone else through you, and you know he's been at work. You would think God-sized activity would be enough to just carry us forward, wouldn't you? Unfortunately, for many of us, that's not how it always works. I grew up from a very young age. I was drawn to the character David in the scriptures. A man after God's own heart. That's what I wanted. That's what I desired, is that I would grow to be an adult that just adored God and trusted him and was willing to do whatever. That I would like David, as a child. I just thought, man, I just want to be like David. I want to be the kid that would run to the river, grab 5 stones, and attack the giant, and not look back. Man, I have run from so many scary situations, uncomfortable situations, awkward conversations, like all these things. There's so many times that I know God's pushing and prompting me in my life to say something, to do something, to avoid something, and I just do Josh's thing, right? Maybe that's been you as well. And I look back and think, but my heart, I wanted so badly to trust God and to obey him. And that's really what this series is about, is looking at some stories about individuals who have come to a place in their life where God is asking them to do something impossible, something incredible, something ridiculous. And they stepped into it. They were obedient. They trusted the Lord, and God did what only God can do. Today we're going to continue as we look now at the story of Joshua, as I mentioned, with the first story we looked at, the boy Samuel. We kind of asked the question, how do we know when God is speaking? How do I become a better listener? How do I begin to be more sensitive to the voice of God than all the other voices that are clamoring for my attention? Then last week we looked at the calling of Moses, when Moses first heard from the Lord, and God was asking Moses to join him in what he was already planning to do. God said, I have come down to rescue my people. And really, Moses' response was probably a lot like many of ours, like, great, God, that's a perfect plan. You go and do that. Let me know how it turns out for you, right? Moses wanted no part of it. And yet God invited Moses to join him. God's desire, even though he has no need of us, he has great desire for us. And so he does as he does. He invited Moses into the fray, into the story, into the mission. And even though there was some pushback from Moses, he eventually did obey. And I believe he mostly trusted that God would do what he had promised. Today we want to look at another story of an individual who heard from the Lord. And this is somebody who had history with God, who had seen God work a number of times, many, many times in his life. But God had always spoken directly to someone else. And now Joshua finds himself the one in God's audience, the one to whom God is speaking. And it's just a fascinating conversation. I want to read it for you like we have the last couple weeks. In Joshua chapter 1, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' aide, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give them, to the Israelites. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their ancestors to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the left or to the right, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you for your own. This is a fascinating story, especially when you think about it from Joshua's perspective. This is not the first time that the Israelites have come to the border of Canaan, the land that God had promised Abraham, their ancestor. You see, the people, when they left Egypt, they visited Mount Sinai, where the Lord had led them and guided them. He gave them the law. He instructed them about how they were to live with one another and in his presence. And then he took them to the southern border of the land that had been promised to them. And when they got there, they sent 12 spies into the land just to check it out, to see exactly what it was going to require for them to take this promised possession of the Lord. When they came back, 10 spies said, it is an amazing piece of property. It is beautiful. It is flowing with milk and honey. It is fertile ground. The Mediterranean Sea borders it to the left, to the west. It is an amazing place. But it's filled with giants and wild beasts that will consume us. We are in no place to go in and take this land. There were 2 spies who came back and said, everything that they have said is true, but the Lord our God has guaranteed it to us. He has promised it to us. The God who had carried us out of Egypt just a few months ago has promised us this, and if he can deliver us from that, he can deliver us to that. Joshua was one of those 2 spies. Word started to circulate around the camp of these 2 reports. And the people decided not to enter and take what was theirs. And the Lord didn't force it. He allowed them to disobey. He allowed their lack of trust to spread through the camp, and that entire generation, an entire nation of people, one whole generation lived in the wilderness for the next 40 years until they all died. So now Joshua has come back to the promised land. This time he's now sitting on the east edge of the Jordan River. God has brought them again to the doorstep of the land of Canaan. And now, instead of appearing to Moses as God had for the past 40 or 50 years, now God appears to Joshua. And he says to one of 2 that were surviving, one of 2 that desired to take the land 40 years prior. Now Joshua is the leader, and God says, it is now time, you will enter. So this isn't the first time that Joshua has been at this place in his life. And you notice the language now. There are not spies sent into the land after God says, I'm giving you this land to possess. Joshua doesn't look for a vote. He doesn't express interest in what a bunch of people have to say about it. He hears from the Lord that God is calling them into, and he turns to the people immediately after the conversation. He says, get all of your possessions together. Get all of your provisions together. 3 days from now, we are going. This was an executive decision by the Lord of hosts that was simply communicated by his servant Joshua. And Joshua told the people, this is what we will do. The Lord has called us to it. Joshua wasn't waiting around another 40 years. And so they got around and they entered the land. You see, Joshua understood that it's one thing to say you trust the Lord. It's another thing to step out in faith, in obedience. Obedience is, in fact, the proof that we trust God. Growing up most of my life, I have trusted God in word. It's not difficult to read the scriptures. It's not difficult to think back at all the times in my life that I've seen the Lord at work, where I've seen his hand of protection, where he's provided in miraculous ways. It's easy to trust that he will continue to be who he has always been. It's another thing when he asks you to do something difficult or uncomfortable or that doesn't make sense. It's a whole nother thing to step out in obedience and to commit to it. And this series isn't just about trusting God, is it? It's about trusting and obeying. And this is what we see from Joshua, a man who trusted and obeyed. He understood that his obedience, that the people's obedience was the proof that they actually trusted God. Jesus was teaching to his larger group of disciples. Jesus had 12 disciples that he appointed or called apostles. These were the ones that he gave responsibility to, and he sent them out. We read about the 12 all the time, but he had a larger following, a group of disciples that kind of followed him wherever he went around Galilee. They listened to his teaching. They asked questions. They interacted with him on a regular basis. There were probably a little over 100 of them. And to this larger group of students, of disciples, Jesus was teaching some hard truths. He was teaching and talking to them about loving their enemies. It's easy to love your friends. But Jesus was calling them to a higher order. Love your enemies. He was talking to them about avoiding judgment of one another without doing some serious self-examination first, recognizing the sin and the brokenness in our own lives. And then he turned to his disciples and he said, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and yet do not do what I say?" You see, when Jesus looked out at that crowd of people who were committed to him, who believed he was Messiah, who were following him all over the countryside, trying to apply his teaching to their lives, he knew in them there were many who said they trusted him, who said they loved him, and yet were harboring hidden sin, had catches in their willingness to obey him, had limits to which they would go for him. And as you follow Jesus' ministry, you see as his teaching gets harder, as the pressure mounts from the religious leaders, as the crowd grew more and more hostile against him in Jerusalem and around the country, many of the disciples that Jesus was talking to here began to kind of fade away. They began to abandon him. When we were young, growing up as kids, my parents, we would go away on vacations. We did a lot of camping around northern Indiana, and so we'd go to a lot of the state parks. And all those state parks, what we really looked forward to most was the pool. The concrete pool that didn't look anything like nature, right? As a kid, that's what we wanted to do. And I remember so many times, both our family and other families that were at these pools, I remember seeing dads in the pool with kids on the edge of the pool, young children, and dad would say, jump to me. And the kid would be right on the edge, right? Toes right there, like just ready to go, but could not will himself to throw himself into the pool. Young children who couldn't yet swim, or at least not swim well, they trusted their father to an extent. And sometimes it would take minutes. Sometimes it took an afternoon for that nervous, scared child to jump from the side of the pool deck, or better yet, from one of the diving boards, maybe a high one. Like these nervous children jumping into the pool for their father for the first time, so often we say we trust God. We know that he loves us. We know that he can touch bottom in the pool of life. We can see that he would probably catch us. We may not even touch the water the first time. And yet when he says jump, we stand there nervous, wondering about all of the bad things that might happen. It causes fear and panic, and we find ourselves unable to throw ourselves at him. In the book of James, chapter 2, it says, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but no deeds?" He goes on to say, faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead. And then just a few verses later, as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. And so we can say we trust God till we're blue in the face, but until we actively step into the Jordan River as Joshua and the Israelites, it really means nothing. It's just words. And it won't be easy. Sometimes God asks a lot of us. There are times where he asks for us to do something impossible, like here with Joshua. You probably picked up on it. In just 11 verses, God tells Joshua 4 different times, be strong and courageous. He repeats it over and over and over again. Joshua, you will have to trust me. Be strong and courageous. Step into faith with me. It's not always simple. It's not always easy. Joshua had, as I mentioned, a lifetime of watching the Lord work. Joshua had been exercising faith in little ways under kind of the direction and the guidance of Moses for 4 decades. Joshua had lots of opportunities to step out kind of in faith, but behind someone else. You see, faith is developed over time. Faith is strengthened when it's exercised through experiences with God. Joshua had witnessed the plagues in Egypt. Joshua had walked out of Egypt with the millions of other slaves. He had crossed the Red Sea. He stood at the edges of that sea before it parted, seeing the Egyptian army bearing down on them, wondering if God would come through this time. And God did. And they crossed the sea, and then they wandered in the wilderness. Joshua had seen the miracles in the wilderness. God providing food and water. God allowing their clothing, their sandals and their robes and their clothing to not wear out for 40 years. Can you imagine the hand-me-downs in those families? Joshua had seen God provide for them, had maintained and sustained their few resources. Joshua had watched God descend on Mount Sinai from a distance, had seen Moses bring the 10 commandments and the law of God down from the mountain, had seen Moses' face glow from having been in the presence of the Lord. Joshua had seen divine punishment poured out on those who rebelled against God and rebelled against those who he had set in leadership. Joshua had seen God act over and over and over again. I've seen God act over and over and over again in my own life. I've seen him provide in miraculous ways when Sarah and I were much younger, early in our marriage, wondering how in the world we were going to put food on the table and pay our bills. There was one year where I was going to school. She was working part-time. I was working a third shift job at a local hotel. Our household combined income over 6 months was $6,000. And we had a child at that time. It was pretty tight. We were so far below the poverty level, we couldn't even see the line, right? And yet, God provided. That we went much longer than you should on maintenance on most of our vehicles. And yet, God continued to push them down the road. You see, God was faithful to us in so many ways. He's been so good to us over the years. And yet there was a season in my life after a particularly difficult assignment where we stepped in, we obeyed God, and and it was a pretty unpleasant experience. And after that was all over and we were in a new place, I went through several years where I wasn't sure if I would obey God if he asked me to do something difficult or unpleasant. It was a terrible time in my ministry as far as just my own kind of personal faith. It didn't feel good because I trusted God. I knew he was good. I knew he had carried us through. I knew he had provided. But it was so unpleasant, so difficult, that I just thought, I don't know. I would hope that I would obey God, but I didn't know if I would obey God during that season. Fortunately, the next season of our lives, we were surrounded by a wonderful church family that loved and cared for us well, and it was a beautiful time of life as we raised our young family. But it forced me to ask the question of myself, and I would encourage you to think about it. What keeps me from exercising faith? When I feel God prompting me, when I know God's directing me, when the Holy Spirit is guiding me into something, what might keep me from being obedient? What might keep me from stepping out in faith like I know I should? There are many things, I think, that keep us from being obedient. Fear, doubt, selfishness, discomfort, control. I've been fearful of failure. Sometimes I've been fearful of success. In fact, sometimes if I know God's leading me into something, the fear that it's going to go well is much worse than the fear of failing. Because when God leads us into things, he tends to blow things up bigger than we can manage. And that can be terrifying. There are many times where I say to the Lord, I just can't. Or maybe I just won't. Where are your red lines? Are there areas in your life that are inaccessible to the Lord? What keeps you from exercising faith? If it's faith that you lack, if you just don't trust enough, if you don't have kind of the intestinal fortitude to step out in obedience, but you desire it, then we need to exercise those muscles a little bit. Jesus told a parable of a wealthy landowner that went away on a long trip and he entrusted some of his wealth to his servants. We've talked about it in the last couple of weeks. Some of those servants were faithful. They invested wisely what the Lord had entrusted to them. And when the master came back, they had earned additional wealth with what they had stewarded. And when the master came back, Matthew 25, 21, and 23, the master says, "Well done, good and faithful servants. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness." You see, those who are faithful in small things will be entrusted with greater responsibilities in the future. And so we might ask ourselves, what am I obedient with now. If I desire to be trusted, if I want the Lord to use me for his honor and his glory, then I might ask myself, am I already faithful in the things or with the things that he's entrusted to me? The Lord has entrusted to me his word, the Holy Scriptures. Am I obedient to him according to his word? Do I do the small things? Do I live my life with integrity, in righteousness? Do I follow the path and the pattern that he's given us for life as he designed it? If I live according to his word, I show at the most base level that I can be trusted. That I can follow his ways and his desires. Do I use the talents that he's already given me? Am I using those in a regular basis, in small things? The Bible gives us a list of gifts and abilities. Do we use those for his honor, for the edification, the building up of his church? Do I bless those around me, my neighbors and coworkers? Am I faithful in small things, showing that I can be entrusted with larger ones? It's important because if we'll do these things all the time, if we live in a way that pleases him and honors him day in and day out, then it shows that we're available. And it's important because if we look back at the story of Joshua, there may come a time where he asks you to do the God-sized task. And even in that moment, after Joshua had seen all these things and walked through all these experiences with the Lord, even though Joshua was one of only 2 people out of maybe 5 million who wanted to be faithful to God and enter the promised land 40 years prior, that puts him in a pretty small group of elite trusters and obeyers. At this moment, now God speaks directly to Joshua and says, you will lead these people into the land that I've promised your ancestors. And Joshua recognizes that this is an impossible task. And we need to understand that if it's God's work, it will be God-sized and it will require God's hand. Just consider what this truth means for our lives. If God is calling you into something that he has already been kind of preparing, if the Lord's already at work and he's laid the groundwork, he's paved the path, he's setting the way for you, and he invites you into it, his plans are so much bigger and so much more advanced and well thought out than any of ours. If he invites you into God-sized work, it will require his hand on it all the way through it. You will not be able to accomplish it. Moses was right. He was insufficient for the task. But God knew that before he called him. This was no surprise to God that Moses was not an eloquent speaker. Moses' history had not been hidden from the Lord's eyes. And yet God invited him into it. You should expect at some point as you walk in faith, show yourself to be faithful, you should anticipate that God will call you to something you can't do. It will be beyond your sensibilities. It will not seem to be wise, and yet your conviction will drive you. It will align with his word and his ways, as we talked about a couple weeks ago. But it may seem wild and crazy. It will be beyond your natural capabilities, and it certainly will be beyond what you're comfortable with. And you will come to a crisis of faith where you have to decide whether you step into it or not. God said to Joshua, "Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the Jordan into the land I'm about to give to them." I am about to give to them. I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory will extend from the desert to Lebanon, and from the great river, the Euphrates, all the Hittite country, to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. This is a massive piece of real estate, stretching from the Red Sea in the south to Lebanon and Syria in the north, from the Mediterranean Sea all the way to the Euphrates River, which flows through modern-day Iraq. Look how small the current nation of Israel, modern nation of Israel, is on this map. It's just a sliver of property on the Mediterranean Sea. And yet what God promised them was the bulk of the Middle East. What is currently Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Israel, Jordan, part of the Sinai Peninsula that is currently in Egypt, probably the northern half of Saudi Arabia. This is a massive territory that God was calling Joshua to seize and control. Now, who did Joshua have in order to do this? He had a few million people who had spent their entire lives. Remember, everybody over the age of 20 when they left Egypt is now dead. So the only people that Joshua knows have been born since the Exodus or were under the age of 20. They were children when they left Egypt. So he's got maybe 5 million individuals who have, for their entire lives, been nomadic herders. Their job each and every day, get up, pack up your tent, and walk with your cattle and your kids. And at the end of the day, put your tent back up and hang out. That's what they did for 40 years. And now they're going to cross the Jordan River, which is at flood stage. They're going to enter into Canaan. They're going to come up against the most well-fortified city known in the Middle East at the time. Jericho was impenetrable. And behind Jericho were hundreds of other city-states. The giants that the spies talked about 40 years ago were still living in the land. It was still the same space. This was an impossible task. And yet God promised, I will deliver it into your hands. Jesus once said toward the end of his ministry to his disciples, don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? These are Jesus' closest friends. He says to them, the words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority. Rather, it is the Father living in me who is doing his work. Believe me when I say that I am in the Father and the Father is in me, or at least on the evidence of the works themselves. Very truly, I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father. And then immediately after this, Jesus promises the coming of the Holy Spirit. I am in the Father as the Father is in me. And then he gives his church the assignment. My Spirit will be in you. We see the evidence of this poured out at Pentecost. In Acts chapter 2, all of them were filled with the Holy Spirit, began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them. Now there were staying in Jerusalem God-fearing Jews from every nation under heaven. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment because each heard their own language being spoken. Miraculously, God allowed his apostles to spread the truth of Jesus Christ in every language that was represented there. As you read through the New Testament, you see in Romans chapter 12 and 1 Corinthians chapter 12, lists of giftings that God gives his people. Serving, teaching, encouragement, generosity, leadership, prophecy, showing mercy, speaking in other tongues, wisdom. Now, most of these don't sound like anything special. Hospitality is a spiritual gift. Generosity, I know all kinds of generous people. Teaching, that's nothing special. There's an entire college full of gifted teachers just up the hill. Teaching doesn't seem miraculous, and yet God promises that when you step into his work on his mission for his purposes, that his Holy Spirit fills you and use those things that he's naturally wired you to do them at a level that cannot be explained other than the fact that God is at work through his people. Very natural abilities used in supernatural ways to reveal God in his work. This is what he does. He invites you in not so that your face will be on some sort of plaque someday. He invites you in not that you'll be praised by your friends and neighbors, but he invites you in that he might reveal himself to those around you as you allow yourself to be used by him. His reputation has preceded him to Canaan. Even though Joshua and these millions of people are going to march into the land, God has already been sowing that fertile ground. Before the spies lay down for the night, according to Joshua chapter 2, she, Rahab, went up to the roof and she said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. You see, his reputation had gone before his people. They already knew that the God of the Israelites was more powerful than any false idol that any of them or any of their neighboring communities had ever worshipped. The Bible tells us that Joshua set up an altar for future generations after they crossed the Jordan River. And that he told people, when your sons and daughters ask about this altar, tell them, the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over it. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we had crossed over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful. You see, the Israelites were receiving an inheritance, a blessing that God had promised hundreds of years before. They were going to benefit certainly from the Lord's activity, but it's not why God did it. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God. God's activity will make himself known. Not just his strength, but his character as well. And this is why God told Joshua, be strong and very courageous. But then he told him not just to be strong and courageous, but he said, be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Prosperous and successful in the Lord's sight is living according to his standards, to his directions, to the structure that he created in this universe, to his moral bounds. Successful and prosperous are only successful and prosperous within his framework. Your life is meant to reveal God's power, but also his character as it advances his purpose in each of our lives. Can I pray for us that he would do so in your life and in mine today? God, I pray for my friends this morning. I pray for those who have known you for many years, who have experience, like Joshua, with you, who have seen you at work, who have had to trust you before, who have seen your faithfulness, who have seen your generosity, who have seen your power, who have experienced your grace and your forgiveness. Father, I pray that the next time you ask of them, that all of these things, all of this history with you, would serve them well, would embolden them and encourage them to step out in faith, just as Joshua and the rest of the Israelites did so at the Jordan River. Lord, may we be willing to put our foot in the river at flood stage, knowing that you will protect us, that you will care for us, that you will do so not for our honor and glory, but for yours, and that you will be revealed to us and through us as well. Lord, help us to be faithful, that you might be praised.